Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow reptiles, this video has been in the works for quite some time, and it's about time that I finally release it since she released part 3 just yesterday. That being said, before we begin with my full-on video response, part 2 of Anita Sarkeesian's Damsel in Distress, I would first like to start out with academic credibility. Something that recently came up within the past 2 weeks was something that Anita was going on a blocking spree. In fact, she recently blocked me from her Facebook page for bringing this up because I posted a video link to a video which, for those of you who don't know, what is Let's Playing? Let's Playing is where a gamer has a game, plays it, has commentary over it, uploads it to YouTube, and he puts it to his channel and he can make money off of it and do stuff like that. Let's Playing is a very big thing here on YouTube. That being said, it recently, and there's links down below to support what I'm saying, it came out that Anita Sarkeesian had been taking Let's Players videos that they had made, that they had uploaded, taking their videos, and then downloading their videos, and then putting them in her video. Now, there's nothing illegal for what she's done, as she's claiming fair use, which, by YouTube's TOS agreement, that's perfectly fine. Fair use is possible. But that's not the issue. The issue is that this woman who somehow stupid people, managed to donate $150,000 to this woman who doesn't even list her sources academically or where she's got them, but she doesn't even give credit to the people whose videos that she took without their permission, without giving them credit for their videos that they made, which not only that, but she hasn't even played the games that she's actually listing. See, as a gamer myself, when I review games on my channel, which doesn't happen too often, but from time to time I do, for example, I reviewed BioShock Infinite. Great game. Loved it. I reviewed that game. But I reviewed that game, and I talked about that game, and I talked about the story of that game because I had played it. The games that Anita Sarkeesian, specifically older games that she's listing, from the 90s, old NES, Sega Genesis games, PlayStation games, a lot of the older games that she's listing, she actually hasn't even played herself. Rather, she's focusing on the specific little plot, Damsel in Distress, trope, which is perfectly fine. But there's so much more to these stories that she's talking about in these games in which she has not even only played, but she's stealing other people's work that they've put time and effort to upload to YouTube, taking their video, and then uploading it onto her channel without crediting them. There's a link down below that supports this. You can see all the screenshots. You can even see the videos that I'm talking about of the games that she took from other Let's Players. That's a problem. Academically speaking, you paid $150,000 for Anita Sarkeesian to go onto YouTube, go to keepvideo.com, pull up a URL, download a video game, put it in her video, hadn't even played the game herself, and then use it in her video, claiming it as, she's an experienced gamer. I have a problem with that. The biggest problem here is that she's not giving credit to the people whose videos that she took. And I have a problem with that, especially when you're supposedly this video that the video series that she's making is supposedly this.
Each video in this new series will be between 10 and 20 minutes long, with well-researched, in-depth analysis. As you might imagine, this project requires an enormous amount of research, because I'm not just looking at a handful of games or just the worst offenders, but at hundreds of games and hundreds of different characters across all genres. This is an incredibly ambitious project because of the scope and scale of the research and production involved. So please donate any amount you can to bring this video series to life.
Don't her words sound so truthful, so wholesome, so genuine? Well, I posted that link to that video that's linked down below that shows that she took other people's videos, Let's Plays, and didn't credit them or give them proper, or didn't even ask to use them. And you know what she did? For simply posting the link, she blocked me on her Facebook fan page, which I don't really care about. But it just goes to show that you people who donated money to her, yeah. Fantastic job. My second point I would like to make before my video response continues to Anita is understanding language and context. Anita Sarkeesian uses a lot of emotionally loaded buzzwords to drill into her audience on how offended they should be. She uses a lot of very big words, words that I had to look up to understand what they meant, and she uses them in a very long sentence structure, which if you listen to it, sounds very intimidating, sounds very persuasive, and even at times sounds very intelligent. But if you actually take these words at face value and you take them apart word by word, sentence by sentence, and sit back and say, what is she actually saying by this? You'll realize that they actually hold no ground, and for the most part, some of these sentences that I'm going to show you even contradict herself in her very own video. So please, understand her manipulating language and contextualism that she uses constantly throughout this video. So taking what I've said already into consideration, I present to you my official response to Anita Sarkeesian, Trope Damsels in Distress Part 2 video response, and be prepared to hear a logical fallacy factory. Enjoy.
Silence!
Stop right there. Do you see that clip? This one right here? Remember what I just said about context a few minutes ago? Well, this is one of many examples that I'm going to show you that Anita Sarkeesian is doing. This particular scene in the game, which I'm going to show you the actual clip of the game, she likes to take little tidbits, little snippets of a clip, and then throw them in her video and expect you to instantly agree with what her points are saying regarding it. And this is out of context. This game, Time Splitter's Future's Perfect, if you've ever played it, was a fantastic, hilarious game. The game had a ton of humor. The game was hilarious. It was not meant to be taken seriously. In fact, this scene of this woman strapped to the railroad is actually a parody of film and cinema of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. You know, back in the Western, when you had old Western black and white movies, how the villain would grab the woman, strap her to the railroad, and then the cowboy with his horse and trusty revolver would have to come save the woman. The damsel in distress, you gotta save the girl. Back in old-time cinema. Yeah, this particular scene in the video game is a parody of that. It's poking fun at how overly used it is. This is... You're talking to me, who I've played Time Splitter's Future Perfect. I know the plot, I know the game, and just in case you don't believe me that this is not parodied, here's the actual full clip of the actual game in which this scene takes place. And you can see it's really, really chilled, and they're very relaxed in the game because it's not meant to be taken seriously. Time Splitter's Future Perfect was a funny, humorous, over-the-top game. It was meant to poke fun at this type of trope.
Choo! And yeah, they're working the controls, and there's Harry's girl, all tied up on the railroad like in some old Western movie. Oh crap, this is not gonna end well. Hit the brakes.
Come on, spaceman! Not even close. Anya, any luck?
Yeah, listen to this. In 1994, a mansion in Connecticut burned to the ground.
Yeah?
Well, it turns out it was the headquarters of the Brotherhood of Ultra Science.
Any energy residue?
Lots.
Perfect. Hey, spaceman, wanna go to a party? Can't. It's time to just do the thing.
You've got to get me out of here.
Get out.
He's hurting me.
Alice?
Stop yet again. Remember what I said about context? This is now my third time bringing it up. Well, the game Deadlight, the short little clip that Anita tries to show here, it's only 2 seconds, here it is again. This little clip that she showed is trying to make a woman out to be, hey, these men are forcing her to strip off her clothes in a video game. because she's a woman. When in fact, that's not the reality at all. If you've played the game like I myself have, the game is actually contextually this particular scene where she's taking off her clothes. She is being detained with other men, with other children, with other women. Yes, that particular scene in this game, she is contained with a bunch of other males and females and children, and they all have to take off their clothes. They're all being detained by this process, and yet she takes this little clip and she distorts it into trying to make it think that these men in the video game are making her rip off her clothes because she's a woman, when that's not the case at all.
Take off your clothes. We have to decontaminate you.
I'm fine! I'm clean! I promise!
I'm sure of that. More importantly, you're a pretty girl. But we have to be sure that you aren't going to bite us. The shower will help us to be sure. Take off your clothes.
Oh, please!
We'll do it the hard way if that's how you want it.
Here, get dressed.
What? How did you find me?
People who make noise stir up a lot of attention. Hurry up, we need to get out of here.
Wayne, what happened to us? Where's Sam? And Ben?
They're all dead, Stella.
But they said this was somewhere safe. That they'd put us in quarantine. That Seattle...
You've just seen it with your own eyes. Seattle is dead. That blood in your saliva is the only real thing we have left, Stella. Now, have you seen my wife and daughter? Shannon? Lydia?
No, Randall. But they have people trapped all over. They could be here somewhere.
Come on, let's go. We've got to find them and leave this place.
Bullet in her head.
What a dear little bird you are.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Suffice it to say, the trope is alive and well even today. And since the majority of these titles still focus on delivering crude, unsophisticated male power fantasies...
Male power fantasies. Interesting choice of words there, Anita. What about female power fantasies? The fact that you only present male power fantasies, isn't that a bit sexist that you don't include the other side? For example, the game Bayonetta, which, for those of you who don't know, Anita made a video about 1.5 years ago talking about the video game Bayonetta, in which she says this.
And of course she's lost her memories, and there's some evil demon horde, and there's a magical gem of the world, something, and so forth, but all of that is besides the point when it comes to this game. First, the positive things about the game. She's a single mother.
No, actually, Anita, she is not a single mother. If you've played the game, you would know that.
And, that's kind of it. So on to the negatives. She carries with her 4 pistols, 2 of which are strapped to her high-heeled boots, which provide the perfect opportunity for her to contort her body into pornographic poses, including spreading her legs and doing a little flip in the air to kill the bad guys. When she lands, she does a little sexy pose for the player, complete with the sound of a camera shutter snapping. But it gets even better, because one of her most powerful weapons involves her stripping all her clothes off and turning her hair into an evil demon weapon fighting machine. Did you get that? The whole taking all her clothes off in order to use her hair as a weapon?
See, here's the thing. You actually haven't played the game Bayonetta, nor do you know the history or behind why this actually is the case. Did you know that Bayonetta, this particular scene where she uses her hair as a weapon, is also part of her clothing? Yes, her hair is part of her clothing. She reallocates her hair for wicked weaves. This is actually historically based, or I shouldn't say historically, but it's based on the myth/legends of witches who actually use their hair for magic. Also, Anita Sarkeesian, are you in fact aware that the character Bayonetta was designed by, in fact, a woman by the name of, I'm probably butchering this name, but Mari Skimazaki? That's a woman. Yes, a woman designed the character Bayonetta. Oh my goodness!
As if this pornographic, overly sexualized, animated representation isn't bad enough, the way that Bayonetta restores her power is by sucking on a lollipop. But I'm not really here to discuss the overly sexualized adolescent male fantasy that Bayonetta is, but rather talk about part of the game's marketing strategy. To advertise the release of the game, its marketing company placed 2 6-foot-long banners in Shinjuku Station in Tokyo. This ad featured the Bayonetta logo with a large rectangular space filled with small cards that enticed passersby to peel them off and take them home. The cards had a lipstick kiss on the front and Bayonetta's gun-strapped leg on the inside. Once a few of these cards were removed, it was clear that Bayonetta was lying naked underneath. She only had her hair wrapped around her body to cover up her naughty bits. Yes, that's right, not only is the game created to and encourages players to undress her during gameplay, because it's basically a choose-your-own patriarchal adventure porno fantasy, but now the advertisers are inviting passersby to physically strip her naked in the subway station. Instead of being at least a little bit outraged by this, bloggers all over the internet were celebrating this as an innovative and successful ad campaign. Women's bodies are constantly used to sell products, including video games, specifically targeted at young men.
Anita, you are a feminist. If you as a feminist want to get rid of every so-called sexy image of a woman that is portrayed in media and entertainment, I say that we need to do the same thing for appealing to women with men advertisements, with men portrayed in the media, with men portrayed in video games. You know, no more guys in super tight jeans or showing off their gigantic muscles or sparkling white teeth of a smile while in their underwear. I mean, it's only fair. It's in fact sexist against men, is it not?
But this interactive ad campaign takes objectifying women's bodies to a whole nother level by asking people to actively participate in doing misogyny.
You keep using that word, Anita. I do not think it means what you think it means, because this is real misogyny. You see this? These women covered in their body from head to toe, only allowed to show their eyes? That is misogyny. That is oppression against women. And having got back from Africa just a couple months ago and having been in an Islamic country where Islam is the trend over there, I got to see this firsthand and it was sick and revolting. So before you say words that you don't really know what they mean and say that Mario is misogynistic or sexist against women, or before you say Bayonetta is being misogynistic towards women, by all means, please educate yourself on what real misogyny and real oppression is.
The ad encourages participation in physical harassment, and this is especially alarming in context of how women are treated in Japanese subways. In 2008 in Tokyo alone, there were 2,000 reported cases of men groping women. And that's only the amount that was reported.
Interesting, Anita, because I've actually played the whole game Bayonetta before, and I never once have been interested or attempted to try to grope or sexually harass a woman on a bus by simply playing this game.
Developers are largely unwilling to give up the damsel in distress as an easy default motivation for their brooding male heroes or anti-heroes. Remember that as a trope, the damsel in distress is a plot device used by writers, and not necessarily always just a one-dimensional character type entirely defined by victimhood. Now and then, damseled characters may be well-written, funny, dynamic, or likable.
I'm just trying to set you on fire through this stupid hat!
What a delightfully mean little brain you have!
However, this extra character development tends to make their eventual disempowerment all the more frustrating. Damsels on the more sassy end of the spectrum may struggle with their captors, or even attempt an escape on their own, but inevitably their efforts always prove futile. Occasionally they may be allowed to offer the hero a last-minute helping hand, or to kick the bad guy while he's down, but these moments are largely symbolic and typically only happen after the core adventure is over, or the danger has passed. These token gestures of pseudo-empowerment don't really offer any meaningful change to the core of the trope, and it feels like developers just throw these moments in the last minute to try and excuse their continued reliance on the damsel in distress.
What Anita Sarkeesian is saying right here is that if a female character attempts to show some sort of resistance towards a male enemy within the video game, their efforts are completely and always meaningless. And in fact, that she will always lose regardless of what she tries to do. As you and me know, there are plenty of video games with females in it, and this is not the case at all in any possible way. Yet she's trying to say that this is the case with all games with females in them. And what's really odd is if that a female character does try to actually help the male protagonist, she simply brushes it off and says that it's only for symbolism. If you study her video line by line, you will see that it's almost as if this woman, Anita Sarkeesian, is trying to attempt to cover up her own contradictory beliefs and statements throughout this video that she makes regarding her beliefs. What you and me say about a game or a female in a video game will just be completely disregarded because she in her mind already has a set mindset of how women should be, act, dress, look, and be represented in games.
Periodically, game developers may attempt to build a more fleshed-out relationship or emotional bond between the damsel character and the male protagonist. In the most decidedly patronizing examples, depictions of female vulnerability are used as an easy way for writers to trigger an emotional reaction in male players.
This part of your video really annoyed me and irritated me simply because of the fact that you actually think that only male gamers can have an emotional reaction to the characters or plot device. I prefer to call them plot devices, not the damsel in distress trope. But when this damsel in distress plot device is in fact used, every gamer, male and female, have an emotional reaction, or can have an emotional reaction. This is an emotion that is known as empathy. I'm not sure if you're aware of that emotion. Just because the characters that you are playing in the video game, whether it's a male-male, a female-female, or male-female, or female-male, just because you're not the same gender as that person that you're playing, the player playing the game, does not mean that you cannot empathize or have an emotional trigger reaction like you define it within that story, within that plot device that is used. Why is it, Anita, that you think that only men are going to have an emotional reaction towards video games? Why is that? I'm curious to know why you think it's only men who have an emotional reaction to characters and plot devices in video games.
As we discussed in our first episode, when female characters are damseled, their ostensible agency is removed and they're reduced to a state of victimhood. So narratives that frame intimacy, love, or romance as something that blossoms from or hinges upon the disempowerment and victimization of women are extremely troubling because they tend to reinforce the widespread regressive notion that women in vulnerable, passive, or subordinate positions are somehow desirable because of their powerlessness.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Let me stop you there, Anita. Are you actually saying that if two characters in a video game, a male and female, their relationship blossoms within that video game by the male or female risking their life to save that other character, which I should note, which, by the way, is what you should do in real-life situations? If I have someone I love and care for, and if someone's going to rob them or something, and I jump to their rescue, or defend them, or protect them, that's something that should be done within that relationship if you truly love and care for that person. That protecting or sacrificing somehow reduces or reinforces the idea that a man is superior to that of a woman. What? What? Oh look, my husband punched the face in of a robber who tried to rob me when we were walking down a dark alleyway. My husband, who loves and cares for me, is now automatically above and superior to me because he risked his life to save me.
Unfortunately, these types of stories also help to perpetuate the paternalistic belief that power imbalances within romantic relationships are appealing, expected, or normal. So we've seen developers try to spice up the damsel in distress cliché by combining it with other tropes that involve victimized women. I've identified a few of the most common of these trope cocktails, which join together multiple regressive or negative representations of women, including the disposable woman, the mercy killing, and the woman in the refrigerator. The term women in refrigerators was coined in the late 1990s by comic book writer Gail Simone to describe the trend of female comic book characters who are routinely brutalized or killed off as a plot device designed to move the male character's story arc forward. The trope name comes from Green Lantern issue number 54, in which the superhero returns home to find his girlfriend murdered and stuffed inside his refrigerator. This trading of female characters' lives for something meant to resemble male character development is of course part of a long media tradition, but the gruesome death of women for shock value is especially prevalent in modern gaming. The women in refrigerator trope is used as the cornerstone of some of the most famous contemporary video games. In Shadows of the Damned, your murdered girlfriend's soul is trapped in hell and you must fight to free her. Help her! In Dante's Inferno, your murdered wife's soul is trapped in hell and you must fight to free her. In Castlevania Lords of Shadow, your wife's soul is trapped on Earth and you must fight to free her.
What follows from the women in the refrigerator and the damsel in distress for the next almost 10 minutes is she just simply starts listing all of these games that have these women in the refrigerator tropes. You go on and listing all of these games, but you provide actually no concrete examples as to why these games using these tropes are bad for society or why they shouldn't be occurring. Along with all these videos that she shows are women being killed. She specifically shows the game Shadow of the Damned, Dante's Inferno, and the 2009 game known as Prototype. Yes, these games all have sequences and story plots of a woman who gets killed. But what Anita doesn't seem to understand is why that is so. Why are these women killed in these video games? In the game Dante's Inferno, for example, Dante's father and wife are killed as a victim in the Crusades in which Dante himself is participating in. In the game Prototype that she lists off, again, remember when I mentioned context like almost 20 minutes ago? Same thing. Women and children and other people are being murdered by soldiers. Yet, of course, she only includes the one part of where his wife is killed. This long list of games that she lists of women being killed are not examples, I repeat, are not examples of hatred towards women. Yes, Anita, many of these games that you have listed have women being killed, but they're not subjected to this sort of violence in the games because they are a woman. Most of all the violence shown in your examples are towards a character that just so happened to be female, and this sort of violence is justified by the story's tone and the plot. You do a great job of recognizing these sorts of tropes. However, the use of these tropes does not mean that they are misogynistic against women. Remember what I said about real misogyny and how you don't seem to understand the definition of it?
But the most extreme and gruesome variant of this trend is when developers combine the damsel in distress with the mercy killing. This usually happens when the player character must murder the woman in peril for her own good. I like to call this happy little gem the euthanized damsel. Typically, the damsel has been mutilated or deformed in some way by the villain, and the only option left of the hero is to put her out of her misery himself. We can trace this one back to the original 1980s arcade game Splatterhouse, in which your kidnapped girlfriend is possessed and the player is forced to fight and kill her. After saving his bitten beloved in Castlevania Lament of Innocence, the hero must then kill her to gain the power to defeat the vampire lord. In Breath of Fire 4, Alina has been turned into a hideous monster and then begs you to kill her. In Gears of War 2, Dom is motivated to rescue his captured wife Maria. When he finds her, she has been starved and possibly tortured into a catatonic state, and so he shoots her. In Tenchu Shadow Assassins,
do it. You must.
The princess meekly asks the hero to cut her down to get to the villain, which he does.
You know, I admit I actually never thought about this before because the word euthanasia, which is what you should be using to describe this trope, euthanasia, is used equally among men and women in video games. I've seen it used in many different games, many different males and female characters, where you actually have to fight your so-called loved one or kill your so-called loved one because they're in a position of constant suffering. I mean, just a few games that I can think of would be The Walking Dead, which, by the way, if you haven't played that game, fantastic game, but there are instances in that game where you do mercy killing, where you put someone out of their misery because they're going to convert into a zombie or a walker. You have the game God of War, and I believe Resident Evil Dark Side Chronicles, I think it's someplace in there, where you have to kill a character who's suffering. My problem here, Anita, is that you're not focusing on the word euthanasia. In fact, you don't even dive into this topic, which is a very debatable, controversial, ethical debate to have regarding euthanasia. Now, if anybody's been a subscriber of mine on my channel, you would know my views on euthanasia, that I support the act of euthanasia. In this particular part of your video, Anita, you don't even go into explain this type of mercy killing in regards to involuntary versus voluntary euthanasia. Games like I just listed, God of War, The Walking Dead, I believe the video game Prey had it too, have voluntary tropes. They have voluntary people who you have to put out of their misery because they are suffering. And while you, the player, may have a choice whether to put them out of their suffering or not, usually if you don't choose to kill them, some other character kills them to put them out of their misery. Interpretation of this particular trope could all depend upon your personal views of whether you believe euthanasia is ethical or not. I have always viewed the topic of assisted suicide, euthanasia, if someone is in their sane mind and can rationally think, but they're in constant pain of suffering, I believe it is their personal choice if they would like to be put out of their misery. Now, for those of you who don't know, non-voluntary euthanasia is when a person cannot consent to the act of being put out of their suffering or misery, but rather have that person continue in a vegetable state, which has happened in video games and real life. A individual takes their life to put them out of their suffering, if they can even suffer, if they're in a state of suffering. And I believe that happened in Gears of War 2, I believe there's an instance of that, and also Halo. But I do believe, and I will argue to the death, that I believe this type of action of mercy killing, if this person is sane and rational, and they're suffering, that their death, this mercy killing, is justifiable. Anita tries to paint the act of euthanasia as something as weak, when, in my personal opinion, I don't view euthanasia as weak, rather I view it as a personal choice for that specific individual.
A particularly egregious example can be found in Grand Theft Auto 3, when after you've rescued Maria Latour, it's implied that the protagonist suddenly shoots her because she's talking about stereotypically girly things.
I broke a nail and my hair is ruined. I mean, can you believe it? This one cost me $50.
The writers deliberately wrote her character to annoy the player, so in the end, the violence against her becomes the punchline of a cheap misogynist joke.
I do not like one-sided people, but I'm glad that you brought up Grand Theft Auto 3 because I'm going to bring up Grand Theft Auto 4 where Elizabeth shoots Manny right in the face. Would you, in rebuttal to this video, say that this is a cheap, misandric joke towards men? I'm curious.
Alright, man. This is what Manny's all about, man.
Manny.
Now, word up, bitch. You better stop slinging that shit on my streets, yo. We don't want it anymore. Hey, yo, Jay, you catching this?
Rolling.
This, Manny, for fuck's
The
sake.
streets have spoken. Now leave my people alone. Yo, Nico, what are you doing here?
I am not in the mood for this right now.
Well, he said he was going to bust a dealer.
Can you help me clean this mess up? There's a doctor and broker who can help. Come on, let's put him in my car.
Let me go.
And the player can't advance in the narrative until you shoot her in the face. These damseled women are written so as to subordinate themselves to men. They submissively accept their grisly fate and will often beg the player to perform violence on them, giving men direct and total control over whether they live or die, even saying thank you with their dying breath. In other words, these women are asking for it, quite literally.
No, this is wrong. Absolutely wrong. And this is the one time that I'm going to say it in this video. Are you attempting to try to be an idiot? Are you really that stupid? I'm asking a sincere, genuine question because the statement you just made blatantly just contradicted what you just said. They are the ones in control. They are the ones telling the hero, the main protagonist, to end their suffering. So they're asking for it, but they aren't in control. What? That doesn't even make any logical sense. They're asking to be put out of their misery, out of their suffering, and yet they're not in control. And I really like, Anita, how you actually, you edited yet again, how many times am I going to show this? You edited the original clip of Prey 2009 right before the main protagonist says that he's not going to save her, that he's not going to kill her, and yet she begs and says, please, kill me, kill me. Another edited clip to suit your radical feminist agenda. Well done, Anita Sarkeesian.
Oh, Jen. My beautiful girl.
Send me to Uniqua, Tommy. I'm ready.
I can't. I've got to save you.
You can't save me, Tommy. You can only let me go. Please, Tommy. Let me go.
Mentioned earlier regarding euthanasia and mercy killing and my stances on it, there is nothing wrong with the actions that these characters are taking within the fictional universe of killing someone who is asking to be killed due to their own suffering. This specific example used in Prey is used to deepen the story, to allow the player, you, me, whoever's playing the game, to have a deeper connection with the story itself and perhaps even the characters themselves. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how storytelling works. There are hundreds upon thousands of films in cinema that have very cliché similar plots, but they're completely two different types of movies tackling a different story, but the plot elements are similar. In fact, most movies today that you watch typically use the same sort of plot devices and clichés in them.
The euthanized damsel is the darkest and edgiest of these trope hybrids, but it's also an extension of a larger pattern in gaming narratives where male protagonists are forced to fight their own loved ones who have been possessed or brainwashed by villains. When Kratos finds his mother in the PSP game God of War Ghosts of Sparta, she morphs into a hideous beast, forcing you to fight and kill her. An act for which she thanks you with her dying breath.
Finally, I am free.
After your girlfriend is transformed into a green ogre and grabbed by the ghoulies, she chases you around trying to get a kiss. Later, you must beat her unconscious before she can be returned to normal. The final boss in Shadows of the Damned turns out to be your own girlfriend.
Where is my freedom?
Who you must shoot down. Similar scenarios are replicated in dozens of other titles as well.
Now, with Princess Zelda, she, like Peach, rules her own kingdom. She's a figurehead of considerable respect and power within her own realm. She certainly couldn't be considered Link's property to be won. But moreover, the premise of the Zelda series is for Link as the chosen hero to restore peace and prosperity to the kingdom. Now, it's worth noting that Link goes about saving Zelda and the kingdom by progressively helping any and all citizens of said kingdom with whatever troubles or quests they have for him. In fact, in the case of the Ocarina of Time, we may remember that Link actually has to rescue multiple other princesses as well as Zelda. He's just the guy that keeps on giving. But the very fact that Link spends the majority of his time helping people surely demonstrates a wider subtext than simply, I am a hero, I must get Princess because she belonged to me. The context of the narrative in The Legend of Zelda is that a darkness falls across the land, and Link is charged with progressively releasing that darkness by doing good deeds. Maybe you're starting to see a theme here, and after all, if there's one thing Anita Sarkeesian loves, it's repetitive themes. Anita points out that not all damsels need to be entirely helpless. They could in fact assist the storyline at key certain points, and she classifies this in the term the helpful damsel. Now, my issue with this is that it seems more than a little contradictory. Barely 60 seconds ago in her video, Anita was telling us that the only requirement for a female character to be considered a damsel was to be reduced to a state of complete helplessness and require rescue by the not necessarily exclusively male protagonist. So if the requirement to be a damsel is being helpless, how can they be called a helpful damsel if they are actively assisting that male character? That doesn't sound like being a helpful damsel to me. That sounds like being a friend, a partner, a support, and someone to place your trust and bond with in the context of the game world. One of my favourite quotes from Anita comes next though, when she states that the damsel in distress is not just a synonym for weak. Instead, it works by ripping away the power from female characters, even helpful or seemingly capable ones. No matter what we're told about their magical abilities, skills or strengths, they're still ultimately captured or otherwise incapacitated and then must wait for rescue. Distilled down to its essence, the plot device works by trading the disempowerment of female characters for the empowerment of male characters. Well, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that the female character's loss of power causes a devastating effect on the people and environment around them, and then it's down to the male character to work hard and suffer through the game, with the only goal being to restore the female character's power, to give them their power back again, and in so doing restore balance to the world. Which again, on the whole, to me, seems to be a pretty positive message. This statement brings us back really to the whole theme of this video and the whole problem with Anita's videos, which is that things are not black and white. She presents her content as absolutes, and unfortunately it's just simply not the case. Especially because when she describes her examples, she more often than not selects a convenient cross-section of a situation in-game to illustrate rather than putting them into context, which is highly important. Without context, you have no point of reference for the example that you're making. Out of context, Zelda as a character seems to exist solely as a weak figurehead who gets captured at every opportunity, as Anita points out. In the context of the kingdom though, she is loved by all people and the only one who can keep the peace and power of the land. And let's not forget, Zelda is the holder of Triforce. That's the entire point of why Ganondorf wants her, so she's not exactly disempowered. The point about the damsel in distress trope is that whilst it can be viewed as overtly sexist and a means of objectification for the female character, it can equally be viewed as not being that, and that the female character and her role is but one small part of a much more complex situation with many more characters, both male and female, involved. As already mentioned, it's only in literally the past century where we've seen significant changes to rights and equality for women, and rightly so. But much of that change came about through necessity more than a chosen social change by society because of other historical events that were happening at the time. But for Anita to somehow try to connect the two, that by somehow altering the way video game narratives and character playability would in any way translate into real life, is as ridiculous as suggesting that to remove all gun violence from games would in any way be reflected with a reduction of gun violence in real life. If Anita is as concerned for the real problems facing women as she should be, I would suggest that her 160k could have been raised instead to make educational videos that could be helping real women and not to just snipe at the video games industry. If she had set up her Kickstarter to do that, it would have been so much more beneficial, and instead focusing on games which has almost no bearing at all on real world problems. There are endless organisations and charities that do this already, but she could be helping to combat domestic abuse, sexual abuse, women's rights and general equality education. But instead, she's decided for some reason to target video games, which frankly seems to be the biggest insult to women of the world facing these problems of all. Anita Sarkeesian says, "I'm not going to help you, I'm going to focus on my own project and my own agenda."
Developers must be hoping that by exploiting sensationalized images of brutalized women, it'll be enough to fool gamers into thinking that their games are becoming more emotionally sophisticated. But the truth is, there's nothing mature about most of these stories, and many of them cross the line into blatant misogyny. Since what we're really talking about here are depictions of violence against women, it might be useful to quickly define what I mean by that term. When I say violence against women, I'm primarily referring to images of women being victimized, or when violence is linked specifically to a character's gender or sexuality.
And here is a fundamental problem with your video, Anita. You describe violence against women as a violent act committed against a woman versus a violent act committed against a woman because she is a woman, because it has something to do with her specific gender or her sexuality, which actually is not the case, as I'm going to demonstrate here with an example, as I mentioned earlier in my video regarding a man rescuing or protecting his wife from a mugging. Let's say we have a woman who's walking down the street and there's a dark alleyway. She is very, very well dressed. She looks like she has a lot of money. She's wearing fancy clothes. And two muggers pop out, grab her, push her to the ground, steal her purse, but they do nothing physical to her, as in sexual. They don't do nothing. They don't hurt her. They just push her to the ground and say, give us your purse. She gives it to them, and they run off. She's been mugged. This woman who was mugged could have easily been a scrawny guy like myself, well-dressed, walking down the same area of the street, and I could have the exact same situation happen. They pull me in and say, give me your wallet. They put a gun to me, push me down or something, and they take my money and they leave. They don't do anything overly violent. They don't beat me or anything like that. It could have easily happened in the same situation. Now let me give you another example of real violence against women. I say real violence against women, or men for that matter. Let's say the same scenario, same thing happens exactly. The only difference is that these two muggers get the same girl, take her in the alleyway, and they rob her, but they brutally, viciously rape her. That is violence against women. These muggers in the second example that I have just given mugged her, not because she was a woman, but they raped her because she was a woman. It's not just a violent act against a woman. It's violence against women because she is being targeted. Because she is a woman. Do you see the difference between those two things? I'm not sure if you're purposely trying to do this, Anita, but you just don't seem to see the two differences between those two types of different crimes. It almost seems like you're trying to say that everything is violence against women, when the first situation that I gave you was not an example of that, whereas in the second example, it was. When Anita goes on to say violence against women, when referring to violence against a woman, what she's actually trying to do is say that video games are actually using violence against women, like my second example where the two muggers took that woman, mugged her, and then raped her.
Although the narratives all differ slightly, the core element remains the same. In each case, violence is used to bring these women back to their senses. These stories conjure up supernatural situations in which domestic violence perpetrated by men against women who have lost control of themselves not only appears justified, but is presented as an altruistic act done for the woman's own good. Of course, if you look at any of these games in isolation, you'll be able to find incidental narrative circumstances that can be used to explain away the inclusion of violence against women as a plot device. But just because a particular event might make sense within the internal logic of a fictional narrative, that doesn't in and of itself justify its use. Games don't exist in a vacuum, and therefore can't be divorced from the larger cultural context of the real world. It's especially troubling in light of the serious, real-life epidemic of violence against women facing the female population on this planet. Every 9 seconds, a woman is assaulted or beaten in the United States, and on average, more than 3 women are murdered by their boyfriends, husbands, or ex-partners every single day. Research consistently shows that people of all genders tend to buy into the myth that women are the ones to blame for the violence men perpetrate against them.
I do believe that domestic violence is in fact bad, yes. However, I think it's really important to mention that domestic violence is not a woman problem, not a female problem. Domestic violence exists and is a human problem. Something that I've seen with women like yourself, Anita, is you like to think that domestic violence only applies and is applicable to one specific gender, and it's not. It's a human problem, and it's a problem that needs to be fixed, and a problem needs to be solved and addressed. Something that I should also point out is that if you watch all of the videos in which the man loses their wife or their loved one is killed or dies, you never see the men, the heroes, happy about what has happened to their loved one. No place in any of the videos are anyone glorifying the death of a woman. In fact, the only person that's happy that a woman has been killed is usually the bad guy. The depictions of violence that are displayed in these video games towards women are not shown in some positive, happy-go-lucky, yes, kill her, beat her, abuse her more light. It's not viewed that way whatsoever.
In the same vein, abusive men consistently state that their female targets deserved it, wanted it, or were asking for it. Given the reality of that larger cultural context, it should go without saying that it's dangerously irresponsible to be creating games in which players are encouraged and even required to perform violence against women in order to save them.
Can you explain to me, Anita Sarkeesian, why these things, which I would consider ethical in context of a fictional universe, are somehow dangerously irresponsible in the real world? It's almost as if you think that people playing video games are not capable of thinking rationally about the game that they're playing.
Even though most of the games that we're talking about don't explicitly condone violence against women, nevertheless they trivialize and exploit female suffering as a way to ratchet up the emotional or sexual stakes for the player. Violence is the primary gameplay mechanic, and therefore the primary way that the player engages with the game world, it severely limits the options for problem solving. The player is then forced to use violence to deal with almost all situations because it's the only meaningful mechanic available, even if that means beating up or killing the women they're meant to love or care about. One of the really insidious things about systemic and institutional sexism is that most often regressive attitudes and harmful gender stereotypes are maintained and perpetuated unintentionally.
Interesting. So are you saying that it's not my fault that I'm a misogynist? It's somehow the systematic sexism's fault, whatever that even means, I don't know.
Likewise, engaging with these games is not going to magically transform players into raging sexists. We typically don't have a monkey-see, monkey-do direct cause and effect relationship with the media we consume. Cultural influence works in much more subtle and complicated ways. However, media narratives do have a powerful cultivation effect, helping to shape cultural attitudes and opinions. So when developers exploit sensationalized images of brutalized, mutilated, and victimized women over and over and over again, it tends to reinforce the dominant gender paradigm, which casts men as aggressive and commanding, and frames women as subordinate and dependent. Although these stories use female trauma as the catalyst to set the plot elements in motion, these are not stories about women. Nor are they concerned with the struggles of women navigating the mental, emotional, and physical ramifications of violence. Instead, these are strictly male-centered stories, in which, more often than not, the tragic damsels are just empty shells, whose deaths are depicted as far more meaningful than their lives. Generally, they're completely defined by their purity, innocence, kindness, beauty, or sensuality. In short, they're just symbols meant to invoke the essence of an artificial feminine ideal.
Help me!
In fact, these games usually frame the loss of the woman as something that has been unjustly taken from the male hero.
So now, I take from you.
Jackie, this is not your fault.
The implication being that she belonged to him, that she was his possession. Once wronged, the hero must go get his possessions back, or at least exact a heavy price for their loss.
No, that is not accurate and that is not correct at all. There is no implication that she is his possession. And the line is, I quote, the line is, "I take from you." He then puts the gun, the villain puts the gun to her head, pops it, kills her. The villain referring to her as his wife does not imply that he considers her property. You have a, well, you and your stupid manipulating words, Anita Sarkeesian, is pathetic. You seem to like to jump at the chance to show your audience that somewhere in some game that a character that loves and cares for his wife views her as a piece of property like the religion of Islam does.
On the surface, victimized women are framed as the reason for the hero's torment. But if we dig a little deeper into the subtext, I'd argue that the true source of the pain stems from feelings of weakness and/or guilt over his failure to perform his socially prescribed patriarchal duty to protect his women and children.
Are you somehow trying to sneakily imply that, or insinuate that men cannot love Anita? And of course they feel protective of the ones they love. Feeling protective of someone does not imply property or possession of them. The characters you're describing here are parents. Those parents have a job to protect their own children. And if my children were to die, I would assume that my wife and myself would feel like a failure, that we failed to take care and protect our own children. You can go to comic books, movies, games, so many things, and when something tragic happens like that, like a character loses someone they love or care for, they feel like a failure. But no, that's not the real reasoning, because, you know, they love and care for them and are protective of them. It's all society's fault. Right, yeah.
And I hated myself for allowing this to happen to her and our little girl.
In this way, these failed hero stories are really about the perceived loss of masculinity and then the quest to regain that masculinity, primarily by exerting dominance and control through the performance of violence on others.
Because it seems from this statement that you just said, it's all men's fault yet again. Everything is men's fault. Anita Sarkeesian, I have to ask, do you hate men? Or are you so blinded towards your absolute disdain and hatred towards men that you have to apply misogyny to everything and everywhere in every context?
Consequently, violent revenge-based narratives repeated ad nauseum can also be harmful to men because they help to further limit the possible responses men are allowed to have when faced with death or tragedy.
So let me get this straight. It is harmful to men because it is the sole purpose of having revenge because they have lost their power. The option that maybe they really love or care for the person that they want revenge for, did that ever occur to you? Revenge in many of the video games are not for a sense of striving for absolute power. It's because the character loved and cared for their loved one.
Violence against women is a serious global epidemic. therefore attempts to address the issue in fictional contexts demands a considerable degree of respect, subtlety, and nuance. Women shouldn't be mere disposable objects or symbolic pawns in stories about men and their own struggles with patriarchal expectations and inadequacies.
Patriarchal expectations in video games. Interesting. You're using a continuum fallacy right here, or a continuum fallacy, also known as a slippery slope fallacy, with your conclusion here. Basically, that says you have a small bunch of little events which, over time, all of these small little chain of events correlate to some gigantic big event, which in your case is video games perpetuate violence against women, and that this violence that is shown and displayed in video games transfers to real-life domestic violence, which, by the way, is bullshit. But what else do I need to say in this video? I think I've said what needs to be said about Anita Sarkeesian. I feel as if what I've said is well understood and well researched, at least in my gaming knowledge, and a lot of her cherry picks of a lot of the contexts that she used her games and nitpicking. But I just want to make it clear that I don't hate feminists. I just do not like this woman at all, and I believe that more people need to stand up to this woman, because I don't know how, but she has a lot of support, and I'm not going to stand by her hateful, sexist, intolerant views of men, and that it's always men's fault, and that the gaming industry is somehow sexist and hates women and is misogynistic. I mean, she uses so many words that words that I know what they mean. Like, I talked about my experience in Africa. I know what misogyny is, and her correlation with trying to, have video games imply and come out as blatant misogyny against women is just, it's so incorrect. I haven't watched her part 3 video yet, actually. So that's what I'm going to do after this video, and you can probably expect in the next month or two another full-on video response to Anita Sarkeesian's Damsel in Distress Part 3. But ultimately, I hope this video was helpful. I hope you guys learned some things. This is probably by far one of the longest videos I've made. It's been filmed over the course of several different days. And I filmed some last month and some this month, but thank you guys for watching. All the links and sources and a lot of my references, videos that I used, are linked down below in case you would like to watch them. Have some great videos down there if you would like to see those too. So thank you guys for watching. My name is Mr. Repzion, also known as Daniel Soulsbach.